teachers to see that their leaders want to actually be in the classroom, so you don't end up feeling like you're just sitting up in some tower giving us.
A friend of mine worked in a school, and she always said, "Look, I can see you working in schools. You should come and check it out."
There's a lot of different expectations of education. Are you experiencing any challenges with what's expected of education in the role that you're in or in the community?
And then they've each got sort of a bespoke um, improvement area that they want to work on for each of those parts. And then
Welcome to Premium Quality Ideas, the podcast where innovative educators share ideas that are tried and true and will inspire you. I'm your host, Christina Kottmann, coming to you from beautiful Brazil with 9 years of international teaching experience and a lot of curiosity about the future of education. Today's innovative educator is Shan Ahmed. He has led international communities as an elementary principal in Saudi Arabia and Nigeria. He has also sparked collaboration as an assistant director in China and is currently overseeing 5 schools as their schools improvement coordinator. Shan welcomes challenges as opportunities, and as a school leader, he partners with teachers to set goals. And Shan always enjoys a football match. Welcome to the podcast, Shan.
Thank you very much. Welcome, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you. It's been a while, but you've been up to so many exciting things.
Yeah, it's been an interesting time. I'm sorry it was cutting in and out slightly, but yeah, I'm excited to be here and happy to talk and see where the conversation goes.
Perfect. Well, to start off, I'm just wondering how you got into education. How did you get started as a teacher?
Wow, that was quite an interesting story. It was so I actually my background initially wasn't in education. I did a degree in marketing and media, and I actually used to make short videos and films and adverts. And I really enjoyed that at university. Really liked it a lot. And when I came out, I thought, well, that's the field I want to be working in. That's what I want to do. And then when I started working sort of in the film industry, media industry stuff, I just didn't like it. I realized that there was just not much collaboration. There was just a lot of people trying to outdo each other, and it just wasn't. It was quite a toxic environment. And I thought to myself, is this really what I want to spend the rest of my time doing? And so I was in a bit of a quandary. I suppose it wasn't a midlife crisis; it was an early life crisis, I guess. And a friend of mine worked in a school, and she always said, "Look, I could see you working in schools. You should come and check it out." And actually, there's a bit of a background with schools in my family. So my mother used to teach newly arrived immigrants English, and my granddad used to run a school over in Bangladesh. And so there's been sort of education in the blood. And so I decided I'll give it a go. And I went over to help her out as a teaching assistant, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought, okay, so this is what it is. So then I carried on, and then I did the graduate teaching program. So I was trained at schools by teachers to be a teacher, and then qualified that way and became a fully fledged teacher in the UK. And that was my route in. A bit of a strange, curvy road to get into it.
I think that's very common for many teachers. I think about some friends who also worked with us in Saudi Arabia who this was their second career. And it's kind of like teaching finds you at the right moment in your life. And as you said, there's so much opportunity for collaboration with teaching and education overall. Thinking about that, you're working in a role that has collaboration like basically built into it, right? As a schools improvement coordinator. So, how are you using collaboration for this new role?
So I work as part of the teaching and learning department, and so I work closely with the director of teaching and learning, as well as each of the schools, the principals at all the 5 ISG schools, as well as other members of the professional development teams across all 5 schools, and also the SILT teams as well, the sort of school improvement leadership teams. So there's a lot of collaboration involved. My focus is around the school's improvement. So each school has a school improvement plan based around our strategic goals. And our strategic goals at ISG are growing literacy, compassionate action, system coherence, and learner agency. And so they've identified areas for growth on those areas, or we've looked at the data to support that. And then they've each got sort of a bespoke um, improvement area that they want to work on for each of those parts. And then my role is to work with them to help empower them to empower each other and the students to be able to do those. So there's a lot of collaboration with the schools to do that, and then that evidence is used as part of the MSA accreditation, which I'm also the lead of as well for the 5 schools.
Wow, and that must be a really big role because accreditation usually has so many different areas to focus on, especially preparing for the future. So, in your work with the different schools, how have you been incorporating ideas for future learning, for future education?
So certainly, you're right. There is a lot that needs working on now to make sure it's in place, but it also does look towards the future. And the unique situation we have with ISG is it's one of the few schools across the international world where you have um, a group of schools. It's a district,
Mm.
and they're all not for profit as well. So it really has a different feel to it compared to maybe some of the others that have multiple schools. And because of that, we pool with each other and we work with the best skills from each of them and from all the different people who are part of each of the schools. And so when it comes to things like, I mean, obviously a very obvious one is AI at the moment. It's kind of, taking a huge role in where it's going to lead towards and what education is going to look like. We have, instead of one school with maybe 2 or 3 people, we've got 5 schools. All of a sudden, if there's 2 or 3 in each, then you're talking 10, 15 people who are utilizing it,
Mm.
which is a very different pool to work with. So in terms of future readiness, yes, we focus on our mission and the strategic goals, but we look very much at what the future needs to hold with some of those pieces of our strategic goal and anything else that sort of comes through. And we use all 5 schools to help um, collaboratively and organically help each other by grouping people together, those who are interested, those who are part of the conversations, those who are doing it in the classrooms, to then share them and do workshops and sessions and lead groups and take ownership of different committees to help promote it across all 5 schools closely with the teaching and learning team and myself, as well as the others who are part of that department.
Wow, that sounds so unique. And you're right, having a district of 5 schools, you can really get different perspectives and especially different experiences. Have you had any pushback from teachers who don't feel like the ways you want to improve the school are the correct ways to go?
I think I wouldn't say, I'd say pushback is more to do with the less to do with not wanting to do it, but more to do with not sure how to do it. And I think when we have talked about these pieces, we typically use some science or evidence or explanation or context as to why it needs to be that way or we need to consider thinking that way. And certainly, we tie things with our mission, with what we believe in. Now, our mission at ISG is we inspire innovation and compassionate action. So that really becomes the motto for how things look. And when we move towards something, it's very much, well, how does that fit in line with our vision, with our mission, with our beliefs? Um,
Mm.
but as I said, we tend to not just jump in with this is what we need to do. It's like, well, here's the context as to why it's important. Here's the evidence that supports it. Here's where we are at, or where do we think we are at, so that we've got some opportunities for people to take some ownership of where they are and reflection of where they are, and then say, okay, so uh, how do we move forward with that? And we try to, we try to be mindful of making sure that the timings work in a way that makes it grow systematically.
Mhm.
There will always be some who will find it harder than others, but by utilizing the schools and utilizing the members within the schools and empowering the teachers themselves, it allows the teachers to then empower the other teachers as opposed to feeling it's coming from top down. It's becoming much more sort of on a horizontal level growth. And then we're there to also help and support those pockets who are doing it as part of um, their excitement of doing these pieces, which means that we're sort of on the ground with them helping them put these things into place and giving them support with it. And then others then see their colleagues doing it. And so it kind of spreads that way as opposed to being a mandate. But again, answering your question, sort of the focus is on the mission, the vision, and using external evidence to help support why this is the right way of going about it. But then
Mhm.
working with people to say, now that we know it's the right way, how do we make this happen collectively? And then using people and their skill sets to help make that buy-in happen organically.
Hmm. Yeah, that sounds definitely like it's the right approach. I think about even backwards planning, when we're making units, if it comes from some professional development educator saying you should always do it like this, it's less authentic and less actionable than if it's my team saying, oh, we understand the why, now we just need to figure out the how. And I remember like even trying to pilot new programs in a school, if it's coming from outside, it's not going to feel like you own it. Whereas if you have teachers actually trying it out, figuring it out in their classrooms, and then bringing that evidence to their entire community, there's a lot more buy in.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with that. I think you raise, you make a very good point because we know, I mean, we go to PD and it looks incredible, but then when you go away, you're like, well, how is that going to work in our context? And so having
Hmm.
colleagues doing it in your context is, and seeing it allows people to recognize, well, actually, it can happen. It's not something that works there because they have. It's like, well, it works here because somebody else is doing it next door to me.
Exactly. And so much, like you said, the PD can feel amazing in the moment, but you can't see how to take action on it
Yeah.
in your own classroom and transfer that learning. We spend so much time focusing on helping students transfer their learning to new contexts. We also need to do the same for adult educators.
Yep, definitely.
I wonder, what are some great ideas that you have put into place as a school improvement coordinator or as a principal or as an assistant director that you feel really were brilliant, premium quality ideas?
Oh, blimey. Wow. Let me make a note of that question because it's a good one. I want to make sure I answer that properly. Well, I think the one that comes to mind is it's less to do with me and more again of that collective piece. I know when I was working in ISG Jubail, so whilst I worked for ISG District before it was with ISG Jubail, and I think the one that comes to mind is when we shifted our early years teaching and learning department and sort of that whole KG1, KG2 to a more Reggio inspired approach. Um, the team did an incredible job with learning what to do and how to do and the why to do. The two of the staff members, we were able to send them on radio training, and then when they came back, we hired an additional teacher who was also trained in that area, and so there was a half a year to a year where the two who had gone had put these things into place. Then the third person came in to then bolster some of those pieces. I then joined them as part of a PLC to then learn a little bit more as to how to do, and we just completely reinvented that whole um, approach and philosophy to what the early years needed to look like. I think before then there was some parental expectations that it was much more academic. Um, there was just a lot more expectation that it was done in a certain way. And I think by having them come through and put that into place and do some incredible things and bring the parents on board and show them just how fabulous this was, I think it was a really exciting time to see that put into place and to kind of put into fruition what we had wanted the opportunity to look like for the children. We knew what we wanted. We knew what we believed in passionately and how it tied in with our mission and beliefs. But it wasn't representative. And I think working with them to get that into place so that it was much more representative of what we believe in, of what we value, what we're passionate about, I think was a huge part of growth and just something incredible to see happen, I think.
Very interesting. I wonder then, if I'm thinking about being a school leader, what do you think are some really critical things I need to be able to do?
I think. One of the most important parts about being in a position where you have the opportunity to support others is you want to empower teachers to kind of to not only empower, but you want to empower teachers to empower other teachers and to empower students. Um, and I think the best people in these roles typically are those who don't create followers but future leaders. And I think that sounds a little bit cliche, but ultimately, the main point is there are incredible educators and we can learn from everybody. And if we don't give them the chance to grow, just like with students, or to kind of maximize their full potential, then I think we've missed an opportunity there. So I think that's probably the big piece I would say: trust and believe in others and support them and help them to become future leaders themselves.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's a lot more about the qualities that you have as far as like recognizing strengths in someone else and being able to lean them into opportunities that prioritize their strengths and then be able to support them with areas that they need to grow. For example, if we're using a new literacy program, I don't really appreciate it if a school leader just throws it at me. I want to be able to understand, okay, how is this connected to our current resources and how can I actually grow with it rather than just having to adapt to it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder if there are any challenges that you're experiencing just in modern education, thinking about all the roles that you have experienced in different countries, because I'm thinking about how, especially with culture after the pandemic, there's a lot of different expectations of education. Are you experiencing any challenges with what's expected of education in the role that you're in or in the community that you're in?
I think that's a really good point. I know when I was in Nigeria over in Lagos, I started my parent session with the question, "What's the purpose of education?" And I did that because I was explaining to the families, and I said to them, "Look, just spend time talk to your partners that you've got or who you're with, and to your neighbors that you've got next to you, your friends." And the purpose of that was for them to hear just how different people's perceptions are. And sometimes it was within the same family. Their partners have had a one viewpoint and they had another. I said, so you imagine in your family it's like this, and then think about a whole school where you have people from all sorts of places and all these ideas and different opinions as to what it is. The purpose of that was, to be honest, was to allow them to recognize, look, we can't cover everybody and everything, but what we can do is talk about what we believe in, and this is what we believe in, and this is what we believe education is about, and these are the reasons we have science behind it and everything like that. But certainly, I think, and I'm thinking about when I was at ISG Jabal, it was obviously majority of my time was before COVID. One thing I've noticed since COVID has been that there has been concern from families about has my child missed out? Are they now not on par where they need to be? Have they, some of the academic side and the social emotional side? Um, I think there's been some concerns from people where, well, okay, the things that you talk about in terms of kids taking ownership or learner agency or they're great, but my kid needs to make sure that they're back on track again. And so I think answering your question, I think the concern that people have had has been with COVID, has our child missed out? Are they behind? um, and when they talk about behind, it's typically academically. And actually, the bigger concern is the social emotional, as we know. Um, there are children who missed out on being around other children at a really pivotal age. Particularly some of those younger children. You've got suddenly, depending on which countries you were in, you had children who were in grade three or year four if you're in the UK, or the national curriculum for England and Wales if you use that structure, suddenly um, missing out on being in school, and then suddenly jumping back in school when it was time to be in secondary or middle school. And those are really important years. So I think for the families, some of them have been more concerned about the academics and if kids have missed out. But I think a bigger part is actually the social emotional. And I think we can bridge the gap depending on how we focus on it and what we do. But I would say for families, the academics has been the question, but I think for a lot of teachers, the social emotional has been the big question, particularly with COVID.
Yeah, and they definitely reflect each other, right? Because if students don't feel capable with their academics, it also affects their behavior and their connections with peers and overall their relationship with school. There was a lot of discussion at my school about how the social emotional reflects the academic. And when we would have parents ask at parent teacher conferences, like, what's the learning gap like? Are they behind? Do I need to do this with them? It was always about spend time with them, make sure they have relationships and foundations. It's not about giving them more. It was all about what do they need to feel connected to learning and feel like learning is possible.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think the other part is, I think obviously, I mean, an offshoot of that is whilst we, they certainly are concerned about the academics, um, we also have this huge seismic shift with sort of with AI, and it's obviously parents have, well, not all, but some have sort of focused on education in the traditional sense, and then you've got this whole other branch now where it's making people think, well, what we did and how we did it, does it need to change? And actually, in some ways, it's justified why some things have changed, um, because it gives us possibilities now in ways that we haven't had before. But I think it's quite a seismic shift. And I think that's going to be the next part. I think whilst parents are focused on academics, the question's going to be, well, actually, these academics that we're talking about, are they even needed now compared to um, what what we can do now? And does it mean that actually is it still going to be relevant? And I think that's going to be the next big question that comes through.
That's also making me think about, historically, there's been so much change, like the last 20, 30 years in the world, but also really in education. So I wonder if these conversations about the dramatic change and trying to be the early adopters of AI in education, particularly, are kind of born out of this fast paced society that we now live in, whereas education didn't change as much in the 100 years prior, and there wasn't as much controversy about how education should be structured. But maybe having more technology and more options and even more availability of knowledge, parents are being more concerned nowadays about what should my student know and have access to.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're right. I mean, education has changed massively. If you think about in the past, it was one person at the front and rows of kids, and then it changed to, okay, now you've got these small groups and you have children doing group work, and then it changed to project-based opportunities and students taking ownership. And all of those times you had parents who were like, well, what are they doing? Are they actually learning? And then it took us a long time to get them to understand, yes, they're learning and these are the skills that they're taking. And we often talk about soft skills, but actually, I think the word isn't soft skills. I think it's actually key skills. I think they're things that really are going to matter more. And I think we typically, as humans, we latch on to comfort to what we felt worked well, and we're not always all comfortable with uncertainty. Um, and I think the way that education's changed, even some teachers have been uncomfortable with this shift to students being much more driven with their learning and independent, and becoming more of a facilitator as a teacher, because historically, maybe they've been sort of the person at the front who directs everything. Um, and so, whilst I recognize some parents are going to be uncomfortable, some are already uncomfortable as teachers with the way that education has shifted. And now you've got this other massive shift which could happen, which I think is going to unsettle some more teachers and parents as well.
Definitely. There's a lot of nostalgia built into education because it's one of the only things that hopefully everyone in the world has access to, experience. And it is very hard to transition to something new, especially when you have so many other things on your plate. Learning other ideas in professional development alone just requires a lot of energy. So, helping educators feel like there's really a benefit and understanding how education can push both forward and keep them stable. I think that's really the balance that we're always trying to find.
I just made a note. I think you're right. I mean, I think the key bit is rethinking, reshifting, and that's kind of what we're having to constantly do. And for some, understandably, that's tough. But the pace, like you said, of how quickly things have changed in the last sort of 100 years has meant that that rethinking and reshifting has had to change quite frequently, and that can be quite unnerving for parents and for others who are involved who want that bit of nostalgia, like you said.
Yeah. I wonder then if we're envisioning education in 2050, so just choosing a year, what do you think it will look like, feel like, and sound like? Because I can't really imagine it yet. I feel like we're close, but we're not really, I can't see it yet. So what do you think?
I think right now we're at a point where we can truly imagine an environment where the children are significantly more active and involved with directing their own learning. I think that there's ways that that's already happened. I mean, you look at the work that Kath Murdoch talks about, Trevor McKenzie talks about. If you talk about project-based learning, there's things that we've had which talk about how there's benefits of, students taking ownership of their learning and driving their own learning further. I'm currently doing quite a bit of, well, I'm doing an ISTE course and a few others on AI. And right now, there's a lot of talk about how AI can particularly support the older children. And I think there's been a lot of talk about what that looks like. I'm really curious and excited about how it can be tied in with the younger children. I was really fortunate when I was in Lagos to actually meet in person Sam Altman, the person who made ChatGPT. A friend of mine was able to bring him over. And it was really incredible hearing him talk about the pieces. But I had a chat with him based on something he shared, which again is a double edged sword. It's about the whole conversation of AI being able to mimic your voice and the concerns of what that sounds like, and are people going to be blackmailed because they suddenly think their child has been hurt or whatever. He would kind of went down that route, and I kind of said, well, hold on a second. I said, yes, there's difficulties with that, and understandably that's really worrying in one context, but there's opportunities in the others. If you think you're in the classroom and as a teacher, the amount of time it takes for you to hear a child read and to make a note for what it is that they're struggling with certain letters or sounds. So then imagine that you've got a reading corner where the child goes to, they put the headphones on and they can hear you speak because it's the AI that's mimicked your voice to talk to the child. And it's prompting with the relevant questions based on the text. The child reads it, and then as the child's reading, it's actually taking the information in and it's highlighting the words that they've said correctly, what they haven't said correctly. And then that gets fed through to you. And then you're able to then see on a document very clearly the words that they've struggled with, the sounds that they've struggled with, what the next step is. And then think about the prompts that they've said and the questions and the answers that they've said. Well, that takes a massive chunk of your time out so you can focus on conferring and doing other things with the students. I think about the children who are EAL students. Just I think a couple of weeks ago, we had a teacher show us how you can build a chatbot so that it helps with the EAL students, and then it goes through the questions bit by bit, so they can't type the answer in. They can't get the answer, I should say, from typing in, but at the same time, the chatbot helps them with a language response back so they can understand what the question is. And then that child's now able to work much more independently. Um, I think about all of those pieces, and I just think about how it's going to allow students to work much more independently. And going to your question about 2050, I think what it will look like is it's going to be giving students opportunities to take much more action and to collaborate more with people outside of the classroom environment, um, connecting up to others who believe passionately about what they believe in and what they're excited about, and planning their structure and their days so that they are able to get those projects done on a much more on a much more fluid level, where they're able to connect with others and use the AI and, well, use it as a means through getting the learning happening, as opposed to using it as the end product. And as a teacher, I think what that does is it allows you to get to really know a child, to really become a much more heavier facilitator, to think about the kind of language that you use, reflective conversations, getting them to think about what they've done, what they need to do next. Yes, there's going to need to be direct learning opportunities. We know that the science talks about that there needs to be some direct learning, and that's going to, I think all the things that we're talking about will free up teachers to do much more of the direct teaching that needs to happen, but then do a lot more formative pieces and one-to-one and conferencing and conferring, um, and just open up the opportunity to take away a lot of the red tape that sometimes comes through with our current way that we do things.
That definitely sounds ideal. I'm thinking about how it's so fun to sit with a kid and read and do a DRA or an F&P, whatever it is. But a lot of the time, I wonder if I have a bias when I'm scoring them, especially if I'm like not marking one kid on the apostrophe S because I know they're not a native English speaker. And yes, there are all kinds of rules and diagnostics that you have to do with those kinds of assessments, but a computer is unbiased. And then I would be able to look in and actually understand the data. Plus, I'd be able to actually track the data a lot better because I'd be able to see, oh, this student kept missing this vowel sound, but 3 weeks later, they actually understood it. So whatever my
Yeah.
intervention was effective.
Yeah, and so it's going back to what you're saying about sort of that look like, sound like, and I think just so that I answer that piece, so I think it's student. It would look like students taking much more action. I think it would be them connected to other people and other children outside of their smaller group environment potentially. Them following what connects to them and that they're excited about. I think on a teacher level, it would look like that there's much more of the back end stuff being done, which means, like you said, it would do the tracking and the assessment piece, and then you can then talk about what the next part is, and then obviously it can guide a little bit with that. In terms of sounds like, I think it would sound like students sort of checking in pods with other people. I think it would be video calls with other experts and other people. I would think it's using AI to get feedback on what they've done so that they're able to then know what they need to do next. You know, we share these children the rubrics, but then actually imagine you put the rubric in and say, hey, this is my item, this is the outcome. What areas are a little bit weaker than others? And then it can come back to you to say, hey, look, you know, well, you could polish this up and expand over here and think about what that looks like and give some prompts for them to kind of reflect with or to push back on, you know, and to open up that. So I think it would sound like that, and students having much more autonomy and one-to-one guidance, either from, well, both from the AI as well as from the teacher as well. Um, and I think that's what it would look like and sound like. And I think for a teacher, the sound like would certainly sound like them working with the children much more closely, understanding them much better, um, and really knowing what excites them and what they need to really target next to work on, because something is helping them in the background to take a lot of the legwork out of it.
Exactly. And that's the best part of teaching, right? Being able to know your students and really help them individually. It's a lot of teaching ends up being noting down observations and then trying to act on those. But if we can take the noting out, we can really act a lot more. Well, I want to kind of end with a story, and you might actually remember this. Do you remember when you were my vice principal way back in 2015 in Saudi Arabia, and you would come to my first grade classroom and sit with the kids on the floor, and you would bring your laptop? You would be sitting there on the floor working with the kids as they were like reading around you, and you would be typing up something. And I was only in my second year teaching, so I thought maybe you're here to evaluate me. Maybe you're spying. But I finally asked you, and you said, "No, I just really miss the kids." Like, I would rather be here. And I really like that memory because it showed me that having a school leader who comes to sit with the students is modeling that working hard is really important. And the students really saw you as someone they could go to if they needed help. And it made me feel like my classroom was a good place that we could all work in.
No, I really, I mean, I, nobody really should get into teaching because they want to sit in an office. Um, and so for me, that was the big thing. I mean, and also, like you said, it was really important because it meant the children could see that even when you're older, you've still got things that you're doing, you're still learning stuff. And they would, yeah, they would come to me and go, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm reading this because I'm trying to learn a little bit more about this because I don't know enough about it." They used to go, "What do you mean you're learning more?" I said, "Yeah, because that's what we do." And certainly, I still, I mean, now that I'm in my role, I'm not in the classroom as much, which I find really a little, I find a challenge. But certainly, I'm looking forward to being able to get back in the classrooms more and getting on with what I need to do. But I certainly did it when I was in Lagos. I did it when I was in Jubail. I did it when I was in China. It was a good part, and it helps to build um, trust with people. Because, like you said, initially people are like, "What's going on?" But I would sit down and have my computer in a direction so the teacher could see that I'm doing something completely different. And and I think initially, like you said, it was a little bit of a surprise for some, but then they got used to it, and it meant I was also aware of what was going on, and then I could connect with the teachers and work with them as to what we could do next. But equally, just even logistics, I was able to see that, oh, the air conditioning's not working here, so then I could get someone to come and fix it because I was actually seeing it in action. So I still feel very strongly that's an important part, being around the students and the teachers, because you can easily find that you're sat in the office doing what you need to do, and you can lose touch with what's happening very quickly when you're in leadership.
Exactly. And I think it's just so powerful for teachers to see that their leaders want to actually be in the classroom. So you don't end up feeling like you're just sitting up in some tower giving us ideas and things to enact in our classrooms without actually understanding. So, for all the teachers, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was lovely being in the classroom, Alan. Oh, and thank you for letting me come here as well. No,
Yes, thank you for joining.
it's been a good chat. And thank you very much for having me join you, and it's been an honor. And I look forward to seeing whether my prediction of 2050 will come true. We'll see what it's like. I'll look back at this and see how accurate it is compared to what I thought it was going to be.
That's perfect, exactly. And then all the other educators should probably do the same thing. Make your prediction of 2050 and see if it comes true.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much, Shan. If you've been inspired and or finished your coffee, let us know by liking, subscribing, and of course, telling someone else to listen to the Premium Quality Ideas podcast. And if you've made it this far, you've earned a question to ponder. If you were a school leader, what would you do today to collaborate with your teachers? That's all for today. Thank you for joining me for a Premium Quality Idea. I'm Christina. Ciao!